Chapter 584. A dark ocean wealth froze, but only for a moment. Then she threw Cassie aside and dashed toward the door, disappearing in a blur. Sunny was pushed away, rolling on the floor and almost crashing against one of the empty mirror frames. By the time he regained his balance, she was already gone. Pierce growled, then threw a murderous look at him and screamed, "Kill them!" With that, he dashed out of the chamber, too, dismissing most of the echoes to take them with him. The fools still hoped that they could save their men. Or avenge them, at least. Sunny also couldn't really be mad at Pierce for ordering their death. He would have done the same. Now that their plan to bind Mordred had failed, the next best option was to make sure that there were no more vessels for him to possess. The sentinels were already as good as dead. That left only Sunny. However, Sunny was not one to let go of the grudge. "Curse you, you bastard!" There were only two echoes remaining in the mirror chamber. One was moving toward Cassie, already thrusting its sword forward. The other was towering over Sunny, its heavy battle axe raised. Sunny glared at the echo, not amused. In the next moment, a Stygian serpent appeared from the shadows behind the creature, wrapping its long and powerful body around the macabre effigy. Then, its head shot forward, the maw opening to a terrible width. Sharp fangs closed on both sides of the echo's face, easily piercing through the skull and crushing it with a grisly crunch. At the same time, Cassie rose to one knee and deflected her enemy's sword with a long dagger. A slender rapier flashed from behind her, piercing the creature's neck and emerging from its other side in a shower of blood. Both echoes fell to the floor, disintegrating into a rain of sparks. From start to finish, they had not made a sound. Sunny rushed to Cassie and bent down, trying to ascertain the severity of her wound. His voice sounded tense and worried. "Are you okay?" There was blood flowing down her delicate neck, but the cut seemed shallow and not at all dangerous. A sense of profound relief spread through his chest. The blind girl nodded. "I'm fine, go. There won't be another opportunity." He hesitated for a moment, then rose without saying a word and stepped into the shadows. Cassie was right. There would not be another chance. They were faced with two equal threats. One was the pair of ascended knights, and the other was the cursed hellspawn, Mordred himself. Sunny had to make sure that all three died today. Well, two of them. He didn't know how to destroy the mirror fiend, so leaving Mordred without a vessel was going to have to suffice. Previously, Sunny had left one of his shadows at the precipice of the stairway, and then commanded it to hide. Now, he appeared out of it, turning into a shadow himself, just in time to see Welv and Pierce shoot past him. Fast. Most of the night temple was submerged in darkness now that no one was alive to keep the lanterns aflame. Rushing through it, he followed the masters and reached the doors of the last stronghold of the Valor forces almost at the same instant as them. Welv simply crashed through the door, pulverizing it into a cloud of splinters. What met them inside was a bloodbath. The encampment of the Lost was unrecognizable. Before, it had been clean and orderly, somewhat somber, but looking like a well-inhabited space. Now all Sunny could see was blood. The floor was slick with blood, and so were the walls. Even the ceiling was painted red. All of the hall was one vast, morbid pool of the crimson liquid, with severed limbs and mangled bodies sprawled in it, some of them mutilated so thoroughly that it was almost impossible to recognize them as former humans. The sight of it was revolting and horrid. And in the center of this vile slaughterhouse, a lone figure was sitting cross-legged, a carefree smile on her lips. The beautiful female sentinel looked different, too. Her appearance was the same, but everything else about her, her bearing, her gaze, her presence had changed. It was relaxed and friendly, almost polite. She looked exactly how Mordred had sounded, back when he and Sunny spoke in the lightless abyss of the sky below. The dissonance between her pleasant demeanor and the gruesome bloodbath surrounding her was ghastly, bizarre, and deeply disturbing. When the two masters appeared inside the hall, 8 echoes weaving themselves from sparks of light around them, Mordred's smile widened. He absent-mindedly threw a knife cut out of a single piece of a pristine white stone into the air, then caught it again, and somehow made it disappear without a trace. "Ah, Sir Pierce, Lady Welth, you have finally made it." Then he shifted his gaze and looked directly at Sunny, who was hiding in the shadows near the door. "And you, Sunless, it is such a pleasure to finally meet you face to face. Well, I guess we've already met a few days ago. Still, what an occasion. I've waited for it for a long, long time." He looked back to Welth and Pierce, his smile remaining the same, but his eyes growing cold and frightening, as though there was a dark ocean of unfathomable depth hiding beneath their surface, full of harrowing terrors. "But not as long as I've waited to meet the two of you," Pierce growled, taking a step forward. "You bastard!" Mordred threw his head back and laughed. "What, don't you like my handiwork? I've tried so hard just to impress you." He grinned, then slowly rose to his feet, the friendly smile disappearing from his face. Instead, an expression of dark, cold, murderous wrath appeared on it. 6 years, 6 long years you have kept me in that empty mausoleum, you and the rest of the great, noble, illustrious clan Valor. The female sentinel outstretched her hand, summoning a simple sword from the thin air. "You destroyed my body, stole my birthright, you even destroyed my reflections. Ah, but no matter. I had plenty of time to think of ways to repay your generosity. The things I have in store for you, oh my. When I am done with Clan Valor, the word itself will gain a new meaning. Even the gods will look up from their graves and tremble." Mordred smiled, then said evenly, not moving his gaze away from Pierce and Welth. "What do you think, Sunless? You and I have no quarrel, well, unless you are still angry about that little deception of mine. I can't really blame you. These two, however, will never let you leave this place alive. Shall we join forces, deal with them, and then escape together?" "Ah, I could be lying, of course. Maybe I'll just use you again, then kill that little oracle of yours and take your body. Who knows?" Sunny lingered for a moment, then stepped out of the shadows, appearing between Mordred and the masters. Welth glanced at him with a hint of concern. Pierce grimaced, then uttered through gritted teeth, "Don't do anything stupid, boy. This thing isn't even a human. I don't know what was done to him, but he had not been a human for a long, long time. He will consume your soul and wear your body like a suit, and even then it won't be of any use. Once Lord Cormac returns, even that which remains of you will be obliterated. It's not too late, join us, and together we can stop this demon." Sunny stared at him for a bit, then glanced at Mordred. Finally he sighed, took a few steps, and stopped beside the female sentinel. Saint and the Soul Serpent appeared from the shadows to his left and his right. Together the 4 of them, Sunny, Mordred, and the 2 shadows, faced the 2 Knights of Valor and the 8 human echoes. Sunny smirked. "I am somewhat of a demon myself, you know." As the cruel sight started to manifest itself from swirling dark mist, and the helmet of the undying chain was being summoned into existence, Sunny had a moment to evaluate their chances. The result wasn't too good. He didn't know how powerful exactly Mordred was, but the chances that he was considerably stronger than their enemies seemed to be slim enough to be considered non-existent. Otherwise, the banished prince would not have had to rely on his cunning so much. From how they were positioned and the little details of everyone's gazes, Sunny knew that Welth was aiming for Mordred, and vice versa. That meant that he was going to have to face Pierce, while Saint and the Serpent would be tasked with holding back the echoes. He wasn't too worried for Saint, who was an ascended and excelled in defense and durability. The Serpent, however, would have to be really careful. Sunny was most worried about himself, though. He was not going to underestimate Pierce. the man was not only a master, but also an elite, a knight of the great clan Valor. He was as formidable as he was deadly. His aspect made Pierce resistant to all sorts of attacks, as well. With this in mind, Sonny commanded 2 shadows to wrap themselves around his body, and reluctantly sent one to Saint. Ascended or not, fighting against 8 echoes was going to test the limits of her ability. That was all the time he had to prepare. Long before the cruel sight finished weaving itself from mist, the blood-soaked hall of the somber cathedral exploded with violence and motion. Welth's eyes suddenly shone with a hypnotic scarlet light, and Mordred staggered as he was dashing forward. A pained groan escaped from his lips, and his movements slowed down considerably. In the next moment, the body of the female sentinel shimmered and disappeared. Moving with terrifying speed, Welth lunged forward, then spun, her slender saber colliding against something mid-air. The clashing of blades echoed amid the black stones, and 2 fissures appeared on the layer of blood covering the floor, as if someone was sliding back, pushed away by the force of the impact. At the same time, the 8 echoes attacked. The creatures moved with the frightening precision of soulless machines, coordinating their assault with enough cohesion to make them a fearsome threat. Although their intelligence couldn't compare to actual humans, the morbid effigies retained enough of the skill of their originals to fight almost as human warriors would. Each of them possessed an aspect, too. Saint collided with their formation like a demon born out of darkness, her kite shield receiving a rain of blows as the midnight shard shot forward. The soul serpent submerged into the shadows and flowed through them, appearing behind the 6 advancing echoes to lunge at the 2 whose aspect abilities allowed them to perform ranged attacks. And lastly, there was Sonny. Pierce descended upon him like a siege ram, bringing down his longsword with enough force to make the whole hall tremble. Even augmented by 2 shadows, Sonny was still unable to compete with the master in terms of physical ability, but the gap between them wasn't large enough for him to be instantly overwhelmed. Sidestepping, he received the edge of the enemy's sword on the vambrace of the undying chain, angling it in a way that allowed for most of the force to be deflected instead of absorbed, and threw his other hand forward, the ghostly blade of the moonlight shard glinting dimly as it appeared out of nowhere, aimed at Pierce's throat. The master simply lowered his head, allowing the tip of the stiletto to slide off the cheek guard of his helmet, and pushed the hilt of his sword forward, trying to deliver a crushing blow to Sonny's chest. Sonny jumped back, not at all disappointed by the failure of his treacherous blow. It had not been meant to do any damage anyway. It just had to buy the cruel sight time to finally manifest itself into a material form. And now it had. Sonny thrust the somber spear forward, forcing the enemy to dodge out of the way and give him a moment to breathe. Strong, the bastard is just too strong. Through the insight of Shadow Dance, Sonny could see and understand some of the Ascended Knight's battle techniques. Pierce possessed explosive strength and enough agility to channel it into almost inescapable attacks. His understanding of combat was tremendously deep, sharpened by years upon years of relentless training and countless battles. A warrior of such skill was not going to be led into an easy trap. His control of soul essence was also on a completely different level. From what Sonny could perceive, the master was using it with terrifying efficiency, achieving results that he himself couldn't even dream of, especially without the help of Soul Serpent. That was the core difference between them, and his main disadvantage. The only advantage he had, really, was the undying chain. The transcendent armor was durable enough to withstand a few blows from Pierce, and his high divine affinity only made it stronger. He just had to make sure that he doesn't receive the brutal blows directly. His body beneath the bleak steel was not as resilient. Neither he nor Pierce possessed aspect abilities capable of dealing direct damage, so this fight was going to be decided by skill, cunning, and the hidden aces they were saving for the right moment. Problem was, Sonny didn't really have any aces left, at least none that would work on the fearsome master. He was already going all out. Sonny had a split second to check on how the others were doing before resuming the deadly dance of death with Pierce. He quickly glanced to the side and saw the soul serpent entangled with the two echoes, dodging destructive attacks as it slithered around them. Saint was forced into a defensive stance, being barraged by constant strikes as she somehow managed to deflect all of them with the Patient Avenger and the Midnight Shard. Mordred and Welth seemed to be at a temporary stalemate, too, or at least that was how it seemed. The second master was moving too fast, and their battle was too bizarre to really tell. Sonny gritted his teeth. Curses! He couldn't divide his attention anymore. If he wanted to win against Pierce, he had to focus all of it on him. And make sure that the bastard had no time to pay attention to anyone else. As well, Sonny used everything he had, moving with unimaginable speed, agility, and precision. Both shadow essence and the tenacious blood of Weaver flowed through his body, supplying his muscles with the strength and endurance necessary to perform with such an inhuman level of effort. His mind was aflame, devouring information about his surroundings and the enemy's movements, making lightning-fast decisions, trying to predict countless probable eventualities, and simultaneously studying the sophisticated battle style of the battle-hardened master. And despite all that, he was barely surviving Pierce's unrelenting assault. Every moment, he was just a split second away from death. The Knight of Valor was just too powerful, skilled, and overbearing. His cold eyes were full of calculating ruthlessness and dark, iron-killing intent. They were calm and focused, like that of an experienced predator stalking helpless prey. That prey, unfortunately, was Sonny. Damnation! Nothing he had experienced could have prepared him for this. Sonny had fought many opponents that were stronger and faster than him, but he had never been this outmatched in terms of sheer power, at least not in a fight against a human who, unlike most nightmare creatures, also possessed a keen mind, devious cunning, and martial skill that were the greatest weapons of his kind. Maybe only Morgan of Valor, but she had held back, and theirs had not really been a battle to the death. Sonny and Pierce clashed on the bloodied stones, their weapons flashing through the air fast enough to leave afterimages behind. The clangor of metal filled the somber hall, mixing with the furious sounds of battle coming from their left. There, two different storms of metal raged violently, one centered around Mordred and Welth, the other from where his shadows fought the echoes of the fearsome master. Sonny had no time to look that way, but he could hear the constant ringing of blades landing on Saint's shield. There were so many blows that their sounds almost merged into one dreadful, uninterrupted litany of steel. He had not heard the spell yet, so he knew that none of the echoes had been destroyed. The shadows were in one piece, as well, even if he didn't know whether or not they were whole, damaged, or dying. He deflected another strike of Pierce's swift longsword, then whipped the butt of the cruel sight forward, hopping to catch the enemy in the face. Helmet or not, such a strike was bound to deliver some damage. Pierce received the blow calmly and didn't even flinch. Instead, he lunged forward and rammed into Sonny with his shoulder, sending him flying back. Curse that bastard, is he made of stone or what? Sonny twisted in the air and landed on his feet, tasting blood in his mouth. That shoulder bash was powerful enough to shatter a stone wall. His tempered bones had not shattered, though. Gritting his teeth, he immediately shifted, dodging a powerful thrust, and brought his spear down on the enemy. Fine, this is fine. The longer I survive, the better I understand his style. The better I understand his style, the longer I'll survive. The two of them fought ferociously, neither showing any sign of doubt, hesitation, or weakness. Yes, Sonny was younger and less powerful, but he was skilled and experienced too. He was ruthless and cunning too. He was a killer himself. Pierce had managed to land several debilitating blows, rattling his entire body. The undying chain held, but beneath it, Sonny was bruised and battered. However, he had been able to break through the knight's defense and deliver a few strikes of his own. The results were less than ideal, though. Even when he succeeded in thrusting the tip of the cruel sight through a crack in the enemy's armor, it was like trying to cut through a monster's hide. He only managed to burn the bastard a little and make a few drops of blood roll down. Why was divine flame not as destructive as it should have been? What was wrong with this monster? Pierce pushed him away, briefly glanced at the shallow wound, and grinned darkly, not showing any indication of being bothered by it. "Is this all you can do? Not enough, not nearly enough, little rat." Sonny growled. "Shut your mouth, you suddenly have time to waste breath." With that, he attacked again, this time switching the enchantment of the mirror blade from incandescent flame to invisible, insidious soul damage. Pierce snarled and deflected the blow without too much effort. It was almost time, though. When the master decided to speak, without doubt aiming to distract and agitate the opponent, Sonny had a split second to steal a glance at how his shadows were doing. The serpent was on the verge of destroying one of the echoes and had already wounded another. Saint was doing worse. Faced with 6 opponents, she couldn't launch a successful attack. Some of the echoes surrounding her were severely wounded, but none seemed to be close to death. That was not her task, though. Actually, Sonny preferred that she didn't eliminate any of the echoes. He wanted them all in one piece, constantly attacking the taciturn knight, landing more and more blows on her shield. The patient avenger. By now its surface was glowing with an angry orange light, as if there were furious flames burning beneath the cold steel. And there were, in a sense. A string of runes surfaced in his memory. Cold steel, enchantment description. This shield can store a portion of impact damage it receives to augment another weapon of its wielder, or unleash an immolating wave of fire. Well, by now, the patient avenger received more than enough impact damage to unleash an ocean of flame. A few more strikes, and it was going to overload, sending all that fire outward. Just as Sonny thought that, 2 more strikes landed on the shield, and the angry orange glow turned brighter, slowly turning incandescent white. Currently, Saint was wielding the Blood Blossom charm, as well. With all the dismembered corpses lying around, its enchantment had long reached its limit, augmenting all the memories the shadow wielded with rampant strength. Sonny blocked Pierce's strike and slid back, his hands trembling from the force of it. At the same time, Saint spun and deflected 2 more swords with her shield. Its surface was almost entirely white now. Almost there, damn. Sonny gave a mental command, and the shadow that had been augmenting Saint flowed from the graceful demon's body onto the furiously shining shield. Another blow landed on the patient avenger. Saint braced, putting her shoulder behind it. Grab! And in the next moment, a terrifying explosion rattled the entirety of the inner sanctum. Just a moment before the patient avenger detonated, Sonny fell backward and dove into the shadow cast by a wide stone pillar. He noticed a hint of surprise in Pierce's eyes, and in the next second, everything was suddenly drowned by blinding white light. The sound came next, a thunderous roar that would have probably destroyed his ears if he had not turned into a shadow. Then, the shockwave arrived, obliterating the pillar and turning it into a mass of flying rubble. Sonny's shelter was destroyed, and he was thrown back into the corporeal world, just in time to be engulfed by a terrifying, immolating flame. Luckily, he had summoned the memory of fire at the very start of the fight. Protected by its enchantment and by the undying chain, Sonny had withstood the terrifying heat. His eyes were tightly shut, and so only his eyelids were singed. The explosion had turned out to be much more powerful than he had expected. The damnation. The hall was completely decimated. The pillars supporting its ceiling had been destroyed, and its walls had cracked, some sections crumbling completely. The bodies of the murdered lost were practically erased from existence, and everything was obscured by a cloud of stone dust mixed with thin crimson mist, which had appeared after the pool of blood had evaporated. In all this mayhem, Sunny was able to sense a few familiar shapes. The serpent had merged with the shadows before the explosion had hit, too, so it was unharmed. Saint, however, was not as lucky. Her entire left arm had been torn off at the shoulder, the onyx armor mangled and revealing scorched alabaster skin. Fine ruby dust was flowing from the terrible wound, falling to the floor like a stream of a morbid hourglass, as if counting off how long she had left to live. That was the result of augmenting and overloading an ascended memory. Even the wielder was not safe from the consequences, as it turned out. Sunny's mouth twitched, and he immediately dismissed the taciturn knight, then called back his third shadow. In the short moment before it reached him and wrapped itself around his body, he managed to sense the rest of the devastated hall. The echoes seemed to be obliterated. Wealth was kneeling at a distance, shaken and superficially wounded, but still alive. Mordred was sprawled on the floor, seemingly thrown out of his invisibility. Only Pierce was still on his feet, as if not affected by the explosion at all. His armor was battered and scorched, wisps of smoke rising from the cracks, but the master himself appeared unperturbed. In fact, his murderous intensity only grew more suffocating. He was like an impregnable stone cliff that could never be brought down by the raging winds. Not wishing to reveal himself, Sunny suppressed an infuriated growl and silently dashed forward. The silver blade of the cruel sight whistled quietly, shooting toward the bastard's heart. However, at the last moment, Pierce shifted and easily deflected the blow with his sword, throwing the spear off course. His armored fist flashed, flying toward Sunny's head. When the blow connected, Sunny was blinded for a moment. His eyes were still closed, but it was as if something exploded behind his eyelids, and at the same time his mind blanked. He only felt the world spinning. Disoriented, Sunny continued his lunge and collided with the fearsome master. The impact threw them both to the ground in a clatter of metal. They flew back, then collided against the stone floor. Pierce grabbed Sunny by the throat and drove a knee into his abdomen, causing another explosion of pain to spread through his body and sending him rolling over his head and away. But not before Sunny's free hand snaked toward one of the cracks in the ascended knight's armor and planted something deep into his flesh. A long, narrow needle forged out of black steel, with gold wire wrapped around one of its ends. Driven with all of Sunny's strength, the heavenly burden sunk into Pierce's flesh almost entirely, with only a few centimeters sticking out of his skin and barely visible in the narrow fissure marring the surface of the knight's armor. Of course, such a tiny needle was not going to wound a master seriously or even slow down his movements, but damage was not what Sunny used it for. Rolling on the ground, he twisted and landed on his knees, sliding a few steps back and almost instantly regaining his balance. A few meters away, Pierce was already rising to his feet, too. His eyes were brimming with killing intent, and his longsword was glistening as it reflected the flames burning around them. He was ready to finish this fight. But then something strange happened. The fearsome master suddenly swayed, a confused expression appearing on his face. A moment later, the soles of his armored boots separated from the stone floor and rose into the air. The heavenly burden was the memory Sunny had exchanged for contribution points after helping Master Jet put down the demented awakened Shadow Blade Kurt. Its single enchantment was simple and straightforward. Living beings pierced by the needle would float up, and up, and up, until it was removed. Sunny had acquired it to combine the enchantment with the dark wing, and receive the ability to fly out of the sky below, if need be. which did not mean that it had no other uses. Pierce was rising into the air, his feet already a full meter above the floor. His initial confusion was gone, and he swiftly looked down at the tip of the needle buried in his flesh. The master's hand shot toward it, but the fingers of his armored gauntlet were too thick and clumsy to dig the needle out on the first try. Sonny had no doubt that he would manage soon. He was also fairly certain that the Ascended Knight possessed at least one memory in his arsenal that would be able to help him either counteract or control the effect of the heavenly burden. However, both of these options were going to require some time, no matter how short. The time that Sonny wasn't going to give him. He thrust his hand forward, sending the moonlight shard flying toward Pierce's eye. Without anything to use as purchase, the knight was deprived of the very foundation of combat ability, the warrior's connection to the ground. He couldn't move to dodge, couldn't control the distribution of his weight to mount an effective defense, and couldn't even use most of his strength. However, Pierce still managed to deflect the ghostly stiletto with his sword, which left him open and defenseless to Sonny's true attack. As soon as the moonlight shard left his right hand, Sonny brought his left up and behind him, used all of the strength the three shadows gifted him, sent a flood of essence into his muscles, and cast the cruel sight forward. His throw was performed with perfect form, just like Effie had taught him. At the last moment, the three shadows flowed from his fingers and wrapped themselves around the somber spear's silver blade. Pierce's eyes widened. The cruel sight shot through the air like a black comet and sunk into the fearsome knight's chest. The force of the throw was so great that it went right through his damaged armor, his tough skin and bones, and then his heart. Still affected by the heavenly burden, the master's body was sent flying up with terrifying speed and impaled on the stones, hanging lifelessly from the tall ceiling of the devastated hall. A stream of blood fell down like crimson rain. Sonny staggered, then supported his weight with his hands and let out a shaky breath. Come on." A moment passed in silence, and then he finally heard the painfully familiar voice. This time, the spell's whisper sounded like beautiful music to his ears. "You have slain an ascended human, Pierce. Your shadow grows stronger." "Gods, I actually did it." Sonny smiled darkly, allowed himself a second of rest, and then rose to his feet, knowing that the battle was not over. Mordred and Wealth were still there, both as deadly as the damned bastard he had just killed. He dismissed the cruel sight and immediately summoned it again, simultaneously checking on his reserve of shadow essence. Sonny had spent a lot, but not so much as to worry, yet. The soul serpent appeared from the shadows and slithered onto his skin, turning into an intricate tattoo. Still keeping his eyes closed, partially out of caution, and partially because his eyelids were burned and hurt like hell, Sonny extended his shadow sense forward and tried to understand what was happening to the other two participants of this hellish battle. Wealth was standing some distance away from him, swaying. Her hands were pressed against her face. Meanwhile, Mordred. Sonny froze. The female sentinel was dead. He had not noticed it before, but she was laying lifeless on the floor, her neck twisted at an unnatural level. How can this be? Something was not adding up. How could Mordred lose his only vessel so easily? He had only fought one of the masters, surely. He had the ability to defeat well, one-on-one. Otherwise, what had he been planning to do if Sonny allied with the Knights of Valor? How had he planned to resist both of them, let alone with a third enemy added into the mix? The Prince of Nothing could not have been that weak. Suddenly, a small detail attracted Sonny's attention. One of the sentinel's hands was clenched in a fist, something dangling from it. A piece of a torn chain. Didn't that chain feel awfully familiar? A cold, uneasy feeling appeared in Sonny's chest. He turned his head slightly and concentrated on the last survivor of the Valor forces, searching for Welv suddenly laughed. Her voice sounded strange and different. And her amulet, the anvil amulet, was gone. The master lowered her hands and smiled. Ah, that is much, much better. Mordred, he has taken Welv. Sunny shifted, lowering the cruel sight and slightly turning its blade. His heart was full of unease, his mind in the throes of a dark premonition. The banished prince had already been monstrously powerful. How much more deadly would he become in a body of a master? A few things were now clear, at least. Out of the two ascended knights, Welv had been the more powerful one. Her aspect possessed abilities that could debilitate her enemies, all the while enhancing her own physique. That was why she had been the one to sap Mordred of a large portion of his strength and attack him. And yet, it was strange to see that the Prince of Nothing had struggled to defeat her so much, and for so long. If he couldn't win against one of the masters, how had he ever planned to face both? However, if he had decided to take Welv's body, and thus couldn't harm it too much, that would explain his tardiness. Fighting an ascended elite while not being allowed to wound her was a dreadfully harsh task. Had Mordred been aiming for Welv's body from the start, or had he changed his plans on the fly when the opportunity presented itself? Was his intention to take Sunny as his vessel just a ruse, a misdirection, or was Sunny still in danger? No way, he already has a body of a master. There is no reason to abandon it for the sake of mine. Right. Ah, that is much, much better. Mordred straightened, then stretched, looking at his own arms with curiosity. He clenched Welv's fists, then grimaced slightly and let his hands relax. Finally, the Prince of Nothing turned slightly and looked at Sunny with a smile. Wouldn't you say, Sunless? Sunny lingered for a moment, then nodded cautiously. I guess, how does this work exactly? Are you an ascended now? Mordred's smile widened a little. So curious. Your inquisitive nature is truly worthy of an academy researcher. Dodging the questions like always, huh? Sunny sensed the slender saber laying by the former master's feet, then concentrated on the corpse of the female sentinel for a moment. So, what now? How are we going to escape this place before the saint arrives? The Prince of Nothing bent down, picked up the saber and sighed. Oh, don't worry. I do have a plan. It's just, I am not sure that you are going to like it very much, Sunless. Sunny felt cold shivers running down his spine. Mordred's tone was still friendly, but the implication behind his words did not promise anything good. Bastard, he's going to double-cross me, isn't he? Well, it's not like Sunny had not been planning to do the same. He gritted his teeth, then said somberly, We don't have to do this, you know. It is just like you said, there's no quarrel between us. We can just go our separate ways, maybe even work together, for a bit. Let's be friends. Mordred chuckled. Oh, I would like that very much. But Sunless, if you really want to be my friend, why do you still have your eyes closed? He took a slightly awkward step forward, as if not yet entirely used to his new body. It's hard to trust someone who refuses to look you in the eye, you know. Why don't you look at me, Sunless? Sunny paled, then backed away a little. I'd rather not, my eyelids hurt. Mordred grinned. That is a pity, but oh well, to tell you the truth, we wouldn't have become real friends anyway. Sunny took another step back, then asked tensely, Oh yeah, why is that? The Prince of Nothing stopped smiling. When he spoke, Welv's voice sounded cold and insidious, full of endless darkness. Do you take me for a fool? Did you really think that I would not smell the stench of dreamspawn on you? You better tell me, Sunless. Why did Asterion send you to the Chained Isles? Why hunt down my beast? What is that abomination scheming now? Sunny scowled. And what? He was genuinely confused. If his eyes weren't closed, he would be blinking in surprise right now. Did Mordred really lose his mind? I have no idea what the hell you are talking about. What stench? Why would I be sent by Asterion? I've never met anyone by that name, let alone knowing anything about their schemes. Are you hearing yourself, you lunatic? Wait a minute, the prince, the dream spawn, could it be? Mordred froze, then tilted his head a little. Huh, how curious. You can't lie, so this must be the truth. But if you never met Asterion, why do you reek of dream spawn? Sonny grimaced, not wishing to answer. However, he had no choice. Surrendering to his flaw, he uttered through gritted teeth. I may have met another dream spawn. The Prince of Nothing raised his eyebrows, surprised. Really, who? Godamit. Sonny clenched his fists, then said darkly. Nephis. Mordred frowned. Nephis of the immortal Flame Clan. Wait, she is still alive. Sonny nodded, and the banished prince threw his head back, laughing. Oh my. So there is another dream spawn walking the dream realm, and she is the daughter of Smile of Heaven and Broken Sword. This must be fate. Ah, I wonder if the old bastard knows. While Mordred was laughing, Sonny was feeling cold all over. Not because of this sudden outburst, but because of what the Prince of Nothing had said right before. You can't lie, so this must be the truth. How does he know that I can't lie? Since when had Mordred known about his flaw? Had he simply figured it out after watching Sonny for a few months? No, that wasn't possible. Sonny had not spent that much time in the dream realm after escaping the sky below, and especially not communicating with a lot of people outside of selling them real-world items. He had not done anything to compromise himself. What was going on? For a moment, Sonny's heart grew heavy, his mind consumed by murderous darkness. He thought that he had been betrayed again. There were very few people in the two worlds who knew the secret of his flaw. Nephis was one, but she was far away. Kai and Effie probably had their guesses. However, they chose to remain silent out of respect for his unwillingness to speak about this matter. That left only Cassie. Cassie, who was right here in the Night Temple, and had already turned on him once. But after thinking about it a little, Sonny realized that there had been another being who possessed the knowledge of his aspect. The problem was that it had been dead for a long time. The mirror beast. The ascended reflection had mirrored his aspect, so it had to have glimpsed it somehow. And it was connected to Mordred far more thoroughly than Cassie ever could be. The Prince of Nothing had not known everything about the shadow slave aspect before. Sonny was sure of it. Back in the abyss of the sky below, Mordred had expressed genuine curiosity and surprise about things that he would have already learned otherwise. Which meant that he had most likely only received that information after the mirror shard was brought into the Night Temple. It also meant that he was only informed about what the mirror beast had learned, and what had been true then. If this guess was correct, maybe Sonny would be able to use a gap in Mordred's knowledge to his advantage. Or he was wrong, and Cassie had really betrayed him again. A lot of things depended on whether or not he was ready to trust her again. His very life, most likely. Sonny frowned, then said, his voice even. You seem to be having fun. So, now that you know that I have nothing to do with Asterion, whoever that might be, are you going to rethink your previous plans and leave me be? Mordred chuckled. What do you think? Sonny sighed. Honestly, I don't know what to think anymore. Not when it comes to you, at least you really are a devious bastard, you know that, right? Oh, don't take it as an insult, by the way. Coming from me, it's actually a compliment. The Prince of Nothing shook his head, then took another step forward. Well, a mirror can only reflect what is in front of it, Sunless. Is it my fault that the things in front of me are cruel, vile, and deceitful? I think not. Then again, maybe it is. Either way, I don't really care. Blame your bad luck for being of use to me if you wish. His eyes ignited with a hypnotic scarlet light, and although Sonny's own were closed, he suddenly felt slow and sluggish, strength draining from his muscles. He swayed and used the cruel sight to support himself. Wait. Before we start this, answer me one last question. Mordred smiled. Sure, why not? What do you want to know? Sonny strained as if trying to speak. His mouth opened. But instead of saying anything, he simply attacked. The Prince of Nothing laughed, amused by this little deception. His saber flashed forward to meet the blade of the cruel sight. A moment later, though, his laugh abruptly stopped. Sonny had no illusions about his chances in the fight against Mordred, not when the bastard occupied the body of a powerful master, one whose aspect allowed him to weaken his enemies and strengthen himself, no less. But then again, when had Sonny ever fought fairly? From the start of it, he had been subtly manipulating the banished prince. Every step back he had taken was meant to bring them into the right positions. The angle at which he held the cruel sight had been calculated so that the mirror blade only reflected what Sonny wanted Mordred to see. Or rather, so that it didn't reflect what Mordred was not supposed to see. And at the moment of his attack, his efforts finally paid off. Because in the end, he had chosen to trust Cassie after all. The blind girl silently appeared at the entrance of the hall, behind the banished prince. Her eyes were hidden by the silver half-mask, but the polished steel armor and the midnight blue coat were gone. Instead, she was wearing the familiar light tunic and a cloak the color of sea waves. This was the memory gifted to her by Nephi's, one that changing star had received after slaying an awakened terror in her first nightmare. The armor that possessed an enchantment which made enemies less likely to pay attention to its wearer. Unnoticed, Cassie knelt and placed something on the floor in front of her. It was a large wooden box, its surface engraved with a complicated weave of a beautiful but disorienting pattern. The lid was still slightly opened, rising above the lip by a few millimeters. Sonny suppressed a grin. Good thinking. The box had not been part of the plan, but Cassie seemed to have made a correction when a beneficial opportunity presented itself. The moment the blade of the cruel sight met Welv's saber, the blind girl grabbed the lid, threw it open, and then poured her soul essence into the box. Inside, the mirror trap was lined with plates of polished silver, each reflecting the one opposite it, thus creating an infinite labyrinth of reflections. The pattern on its surface shined with a pale glow. Mordred staggered, his laughter cutting short. His hands seemed to weaken. Sonny easily pushed the saber aside and thrust his spear forward, aiming to end the fight with one ruthless strike. However, the Prince of Nothing wasn't done yet. He recoiled, narrowly avoiding the killing blow. Even though the tip of the cruel sight pierced Welv's flesh, the wound wasn't fatal. In the next moment, Mordred disengaged, jumping back and staggering as he raised the saber into a defensive stance. His eyes darted toward the wooden box. That cursed thing. Blood was streaming down his side, but the banished prince didn't seem to care. Neither did Sonny. He dashed forward, feinting a downward slash, then turning it into a swift thrust. Who knew how long Mordred would be slowed down by the mirror trap? It hadn't helped the forces of valor. He had to finish this fast. Mordred barely deflected the attack, moving with visible strain. His mouth twitched. Hey, Sunless, why don't you go and destroy that box? Sonny pushed forward, closing the distance between them and simultaneously turning the cruel sight into a sword. It flashed through the air, but was deflected once again. Even with his powers reduced so direly, the prince was still a formidable fighter. Mordred bared his teeth. No, but I must insist. Why don't you go and kill that little oracle of yours? His eyes gleamed with vicious amusement. Lost from light, that is your true name, is it not? Do it. Sonny froze, his sword trembled. Then, as his face became pale as a ghost and his pupils widened in horror, he slowly turned, facing Cassie. A strange sound escaped from his lips. Mordred smiled, slightly relaxing his guard. It was at that moment that the cruel sight shot toward his body. easily sliding past the slender saber. Sunny scoffed. "Why don't you go to hell? I already have a master." Indeed, it was as Sunny had thought. Mordred had learned his secrets from the mirror shard left behind by his beast. He didn't really know of his aspect. He only knew of its reflection. And that reflection was incomplete. That was why the cunning prince had assumed that he would be able to enslave Sunny by using his true name. Of course, Mordred would have been careful, taking the possibility that Lost from Light already had a master into account, but Sunny was half a step ahead. He had doused that caution by being ready to pretend to be enslaved. And then attacked. The cruel sight shot forward, narrowly avoiding the mirror fiend's saber and sinking deep into his flesh. It cut through the enchanted black tunic, pierced Welv's body, and emerged from her back. Mordred's face contorted, his eyes full of shock and pain. Sunny, of course, couldn't see it, since he was still relying on shadow sense to navigate the world. All he felt was a tremble that went through his enemy's body. A moment later, the Prince of Nothing groaned, a stream of blood escaping from his mouth. Then he lashed out with the saber, forcing Sunny to stagger back. The cruel sight slid out of the terrible wound, wreaking more damage on its way back. Sunny was slightly disappointed that he had not been able to end the fight right there and then, but it hardly mattered. The wound he had delivered was not immediately fatal, but deadly nevertheless. Now, all he had to do was wait for the enemy to bleed out. Even a master's body was not resilient enough to stem the flood of blood he had caused. Mordred, it seemed, realized the same and dashed forward in a desperate attempt to kill Sunny before the blood loss made him too weak. Or so Sunny thought. What? Instead of attacking with the saber, the Prince of Nothing used it to push the cruel sight aside, and continued to move forward, eventually colliding with Sunny and grabbing him by the throat. Is he crazy? At such a close distance, Sunny had all the advantages. Mordred couldn't slash with the saber, but he could easily bring his short sword back for a killing thrust, long before anyone would have been able to strangle him. This attack made no sense. However, in the next moment, he felt that something was wrong. And then his chest was pierced by a blinding explosion of pain. Sunny screamed and staggered back, falling to the floor. Somehow, against all logic, the Prince of Nothing seemed unscathed again, the bloody gash on his torso gone. Instead, it was as though Sunny had run himself through with a sword. He could feel a deep wound in his chest, even though the surface of the undying chain remained unbroken. See curses. Fighting through the pain, he rolled away, dodging the descending saber. Luckily for him, Mordred did not pursue, instead choosing to dash toward Cassie and the mirror trap. Damned wealth. Although Sunny was not entirely clear on what had happened and how he had ended up with a hole in his chest, he had an inkling. Welv's aspects seemed to be all about devoiding the enemy of their power while enhancing your own, almost as if transferring it. A master had 3 aspect abilities. Was her third ability capable of transferring wounds from her body to that of others? If so, was he going to die by his own sword? No, he wouldn't. Unlike Mordred, Sunny was not going to bleed to death. In fact, he was barely bleeding at all. His body was pierced and heavily damaged, but fortunately, blood loss was one of the 2 causes of death he was practically immune to. The other being broken bones. The evolved weaves of his body would not allow such a thing to happen. Arg! Growling from pain, Sunny stood up and swayed slightly. He didn't feel too well, in fact, he felt pretty terrible. Every breath was torture, and his heartbeat was strange and irregular. Every contraction sent a pulse of suffering rolling through his body. It's all right, I've been through worse, I think. Sunny willed the midnight shard to manifest itself into existence, and tried to assess what was happening around him. Mordred was already upon Cassie, his saber flashing toward her neck. The blind girl met his attack with a skillful block, the quiet dancer ringing clearly as it deflected the enemy's blade. The blind girl survived. However, she was pushed back, away from the mirror trap. As soon as her hand left the surface of the wooden box and the flow of soul essence was interrupted, the glow of the engraved pattern shimmered, dimmed, and was then extinguished. Mordred sighed. Not bad, guys, truly a valiant effort. He glanced at the mirror trap, and then brought the saber down on it, turning the box into a pile of splinters and mangled silver plates. Sunny shuddered. Crap. Released from the burden and back to the full might of his stolen body, the Prince of Nothing inhaled deeply, an expression of delight on his face. Then he turned to Sunny and smiled amicably. Now who should I deal with first? At that moment, the austere Takai finished manifesting itself into existence. The unbroken enchantment activated, filling him with newfound power. Its effect wasn't as incredible as when he had been a mere sleeper, but still quite pronounced. Holding the midnight shard in one hand and the cruel sight in another, Sunny willed the mirror blade to ignite with the incandescent light of the divine flame, and grimaced. Come here, your royal highness. I can promise to kill you quickly. With Sunny in front of him and Cassie behind, Mordred laughed. So fun, what a pity. I am really going to miss you, Sunless. With that, he blurred and was suddenly just a step away, the slender saber falling down with terrifying speed. The two of them clashed, with one attacking and the other desperately trying to defend. The ringing of steel merged into one deafening sound. Sunny cursed. Although it seemed like an eternity, in fact, just a second had passed. The quiet dancer had not even had time to reach them from the other end of the hall to help. And he really needed help. Perhaps if he had not been wounded, and under the debilitating effect of Welv's aspect, Sunny would have been able to hold his ground against the deadly prince. With 3 shadows wrapped around his body and the gift of the unbroken, his prowess would not have been much less than that of a master. But as things stood currently, fighting against Mordred was like trying to fend off a tornado. He barely managed to deflect the killing blows, but couldn't do anything against the rest of the rain of ruthless strikes. The Prince of Nothing fought with terrifying skill and purpose, not leaving Sunny any chances to retaliate. Well, what else did he expect from the heir of war god? The bastard truly lived up to his lineage. The undying chain held for now, but Sunny knew that it wouldn't be able to protect him much longer. Even when the quiet dancer joined the fray, things didn't change much. Sunny thought feverishly, trying to come up with some trick, some way for him to survive and prevail. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't think of anything he could do to win this fight. It all seemed hopeless. Slowly, a creeping fear settled in his heart. Ignoring it, ignoring the terrible pain nesting in his chest, Sunny gritted his teeth and continued to resist with all his might, all his cunning, and all his will. And it was then that Cassie's voice suddenly reached his ears. Open your eyes. He shivered, suddenly experiencing a feeling of a terrifying déjà vu. What, has she lost her mind? Open your eyes, open them, Sunny. Was Cassie hysterical or planning to kill him? Why else would she give him such stupid advice? Sunny couldn't come up with one logical reason to listen to her. In the end, it all came down to a question of blind trust. He sighed, then strained his singed eyelids and slowly opened his eyes. Mordred's figure came into focus, a surprised and joyful expression on his stolen face. Sunny saw his reflection in Welv's eyes, clad in the bleak steel of the undying chain. No, it wasn't him. There was another reflection hiding even deeper, almost lost in the darkness. And then it was gone. Something cold and alien entered him through the reflection, sinking deep into the dark depths of his soul. A moment later, the world disappeared. Sunny found himself in the tranquil darkness of his soul sea. It seemed as empty and silent as usual. The three black suns burned with dark flames above him, arranged in a perfect triangle. Small spheres of light, his memories, floated between them like dying stars. The silent waters were vast and motionless, and some distance away, just beyond the periphery of his vision, the rows of lifeless shadows stood, unmoving. However, this time something was different. Sunny did not remember entering the Soul Sea, or even wishing to do so. More than that, he couldn't perceive the real world at all. Usually, visiting this place resulted in a strange split of his consciousness, with one part of it exploring the depths of his soul, while the other remained aware of his actual surroundings. It was akin to imagining a landscape. Doing so did not turn you blind and deaf. But now, he was here and only here, as nothing existed outside of this dark and silent sea. Come to think of it, it was a lonely and frightening place. Untethered from the real world and surrounded by nothing except for deathly silence, Sunny did not feel as calm and comfortable as he usually would. And he wasn't really alone in the darkness. What a strange soul you have. Hearing those words, Sunny flinched, then turned around. The voice that had spoken them did not belong to Welv. It was familiar and pleasant. Just like it had been in the lightless abyss of the sky below, Mordred was speaking with his real voice once again. The Prince of Nothing stood some distance away, looking up with a curious smile on his face. Now, for the first time, Sunny saw how he must have looked before his true body was destroyed. Mordred was tall and slender, with pale skin and raven-black hair. He seemed to be in his 20s, older than Kai and Effie by a couple of years. His face was sharp and thin, not exactly handsome, but at the same time charming and strangely beautiful. His most striking feature, though, were his eyes, which didn't seem to possess a color of their own, and instead reflected the world back on itself like two pools of liquid silver. Currently, they were as dark and lightless as the endless abyss of the void. Mordred was dressed in a simple tunic, its fabric long devoid of any color. He wore no armor and didn't seem to bear any weapon. However, Sunny could feel immense pressure radiating from his slender figure and knew that he was in mortal danger. What surprised him, however, was that Mordred's face seemed familiar. In fact, he looked exactly like a slightly older male version of Morgan of Valor. The resemblance was too striking to be a coincidence. It could only be shared by siblings. And there was another thing that Sunny saw which made him tense and apprehensive. All around the Prince of Nothing, he could see a pale golden glow, the same kind of beautiful radiance that hid in his own blood and surrounded Nephi's, the light of divinity. Curses! Mordred studied the three cores of Sunny's soul curiously, then looked at him with a friendly smile. I have never seen anything like it. How kind it was of you to invite me inside, Sunless. I really do wonder what your little friend was thinking, though. Does she, perhaps, think that you will be able to resist me? Sunny stared at the invader somberly, then shrugged. How would I know what she is thinking? Trying to understand an oracle is a fool's errand, you know. Mordred chuckled. Ah, wiser words have never been said. Well, I guess we will find out soon. Sunny shifted slightly, then asked, his voice gloomy. Why would you even want to possess my body anyway? Didn't you get well already? What's so great about it that you would rather have me than a master? The Prince of Nothing smiled. Who says I can't have you both? That seemed like an answer, but actually it wasn't. Sunny had already experienced Mordred's habit of dodging questions to be misled this way. He frowned and glared at the mirror fiend, unamused. The invader laughed. So serious, don't sell yourself short, Sunless. You might be just an awaken, but then, who else should I make a vessel if I wish to ascend myself? Plus, your body suits my current needs perfectly. You have an aspect that gifts you both stealth and teleportation abilities. A perfect combination for someone who wishes to escape a saint, don't you think? He took another step forward and continued. I also have never met or heard of anyone else who possesses a divine aspect. Imagine my surprise when I found out that you were just like me. And that thing you have, I am very curious to find out what it is that allowed you to make me blind, back in the Ebony Tower. Such a powerful anti-divination artifact will make my life much, much easier. So, you see, although I am not too happy about it, taking you as a vessel is a regretful but inevitable choice I had to make. Sonny narrowed his eyes, trying to understand what Mordred was talking about. Making him blind, back in the Ebony Tower. Sonny had worn Weaver's mask to read the harrowing runes on the 5th level of the stronghold of the ruler of the underworld. Was that what the mirror fiend meant? So the mask had been able to hide Sonny from his spying, as well, and more than that, the mirror beast had not managed to glimpse its secrets. So Mordred did not know what it was, just that there was something in Sonny's possession that could prevent him from being tracked and seen by otherworldly means. When he narrowed his eyes, though, something else happened. Sonny didn't expect it, so he almost lost his composure. He had not known that he possessed such an ability, but it seemed that the evolution of the blood weave had enhanced his eyes as well. Suddenly, he was able to peer beneath the surface of Mordred's soul, just like he was able to peer beneath the surface of memories and echoes to study their weaves. And what he saw there made him tremble. Grab! As a living soul, the Prince of Nothing did not possess a spellweave, of course. However, what he did possess were soul cores, 6 of them. Mordred was a terror, and that terror was getting closer and closer to Sonny. To tell you the truth, Sunless, your body fits me so perfectly that I even thought, for a second, that the old man had sent you to me as a gift. Gods know he has a lot to apologize for, to think that he had nothing to do with it, and all of this was just a coincidence. That funny attribute of yours is really something, isn't it? Sonny gritted his teeth, and then said in a grim tone, "That is really wonderful. I am very glad for you, pal. However, what exactly happens now? You don't really expect me to just surrender my body to you, right?" Here in the Soul Sea, Sonny wasn't bound by his flaw, since his words were nothing more than thoughts. It was actually a bit of a relief. Mordred stopped, now just a few steps away from him, and smiled. "Now? Why, what else? Now I'm going to destroy your soul, of course." Sonny looked down on himself, evaluating his own state. The wound in his chest was gone. However, it wasn't as though he was unscathed. His body, or at least this manifestation of it, seemed battered and beaten. However, it was also full of ferocious strength and vigor, as well as feeling light, as if a tremendous weight had been lifted off his shoulders just a few moments ago. He didn't know how exactly this battle of the souls was supposed to work, but suspected that his current form was a representation of his spirit. He had endured a lot in these recent weeks, enough suffering and fear to crush someone with a lesser will. Sonny, however, had survived far worse, so his strength was not diminished by much. He was still clad in the bleak steel of the undying chain and holding his weapons. 3 shadows lay at his feet, and he could feel the presence of the soul serpent nearby. His enemy, meanwhile, was alone and unarmed. This was Sonny's soul, after all. Here, he was bound to have the ultimate advantage. "Let's see who will destroy whom, you bastard." With a smirk, Sonny commanded the shadows to rise and wrap themselves around his body. Instantly, his strength, speed, and resilience were enhanced manifold. In the next moment, however, his expression froze. Mordred looked at him, then smiled. As he did, 6 shadows descended upon him like a dark mantle, making the pressure that the Prince of Nothing exerted feel almost suffocating. "You didn't think that it would be that easy, did you?" A split second later, he was beside Sonny, his fist crashing into the breastplate of the undying chain. As pain exploded through his body, Sonny flew back and fell onto the still water, sliding across it into the darkness. "What?" Before he could even rise, Mordred was already upon him. his foot slamming into Sunny's ribs. Sunny yelped as he was thrown into the air, then felt another blow landing on his chest, pushing all air out of his lungs and sending him plummeting back down. Knowing that he had to escape somehow, Sunny dove into the shadows and emerged from the darkness behind the Prince of Nothing, the blade of the cruel sight shooting forward. However, it pierced nothing but air. Mordred had turned into a shadow himself and disappeared without a trace, his laughter echoing across the surface of the silent sea. Wake to wake. Something struck Sunny in the back, sending another explosion of pain rolling through the very core of his being. He groaned and tried to slash with the midnight shard, but the enemy was already gone. A moment later, he was kicked in the abdomen, then ruthlessly slammed across the face. Mordred's fist felt like a sledgehammer, no, like a mountain descending. Half blinded and disoriented, Sunny fell to his knees, spitting blood. What the hell? This was not how he had imagined things going. The damned mirror fiend clearly had to weaken his prey before attacking, so his victory was not set in stone. There was a way to defeat him somehow, and since Sunny's spirit had not been broken, he had expected to be able to prevail. However, the bastard was just too powerful. How was he supposed to resist such terrifying force? Worse than that, Mordred seemed to be able to mirror all of his powers. Bastard lost from light, stop. The Prince of Nothing laughed again, then struck Sunny in the side of his head, almost blinding him. Sorry to say this, but that trick is not going to work. This is an entirely different situation, you know. Hurting and hopping to escape the next blow, Sunny turned into a shadow again. This time, however, he wasn't in a hurry to attack and remained incorporeal, thinking. Before he could form a single thought, however, another shadow lunged at him from the darkness, and suddenly he was in the throes of indescribable agony, his very soul damaged and cracked. With a stifled shriek, Sunny escaped the shadows and assumed his human form again, only to be ruthlessly struck down a moment later. He fell on his back and desperately gulped for air, but his lungs seemed to be paralyzed. All he could do was try to block the next blow, only for it to fail, and another wave of pain spread through his body. Got him it. Sunny used Shadow Step to disengage, but his enemy simply followed. He deflected one strike, almost managing to cut Mordred's forearm open, but the mirror fiend was just too fast, strong, and skilled. No matter how hard Sunny fought, it was all useless. No matter what strategy he tried to implement, Mordred saw right through it. Fighting against the Prince of Nothing was like fighting against death itself. He was terrifying, inevitable, and final. There was no escape. But Sunny was not going to give up. At this point, he wasn't even sure that he knew how. He gritted his teeth, endured the pain, and fought. After what seemed like an eternity, beaten and bloodied, Sunny was thrown down again. The helmet of the undying chain was bent and deformed, pressing into his temple and obstructing his vision. He dismissed it and raised a hand to defend himself, but it was easily wrestled down. Mordred had a few bruises of his own, but looked infinitely better than Sunny. Grabbing him by the throat, the banished prince inhaled deeply, and then asked in a somber tone, "Haven't you had enough? Why don't you just surrender? I am not enjoying this one bit, you know." Sunny looked at him through the red haze and grinned, his teeth painted red by blood. Really? Too bad, 'cause I'm actually having the time of my life." With that, he lowered his head and tried to sink his teeth into Mordred's hand. The Prince of Nothing sighed, then hit Sunny in the face, sending him rolling away. Crap, that one really hurt. Sunny slid a few meters and came to a rest just beyond the rows of silent shadows. He tried to stand up, but the world suddenly spun around, making him fall back down. A quiet groan escaped from his lips. Mordred shook his head dejectedly, and then walked over to the cruel sight, which lay on the surface of the tranquil waters where Sunny had dropped it. He bent down to pick it up, but the somber spear simply turned to tenebrous mist, dismissed by its master. The mirror fiend remained unperturbed. He lowered his fingers into the water and caught the reflection of the fearsome memory before it fully dissipated, then brought it up, ending up with the exact same spear in his hand. To think that the spell would make it anew and return it to me. It's fitting, I guess. He studied the cruel sight for a moment, then turned to Sonny, a dark look in his eyes. Let's end this now, no matter what you may think. I don't enjoy torturing people. Unless they deserve to be tortured, of course. Sonny finally managed to rise to his knees and glanced at the approaching prince with a grim expression. One of his hands reached toward the hilt of the midnight shard, which lay some distance away, while the other was pinned awkwardly behind him. In it, a ghostly stiletto silently appeared, its transparent blade hidden from sight by Sonny's body. Whatever you say. Mordred willed the cruel sight to extend to its full length, then lunged forward, thrusting it toward Sonny's heart. Sonny tensed, preparing to dodge. But before he had a chance to, he was suddenly covered by a massive shadow, and a long, multi-jointed arm appeared from somewhere above, blocking the blade of the spear with its terrifying bone claws. Sonny blinked. Mordred froze too and then slowly looked up. As he did, Sonny mirrored the movement. Towering above him, the shadow of the Mountain King stood silently, one of its 4 arms extended forward. For a moment, nothing happened. And then another shadow moved slightly, clicking its chitinous claws. One of the carapace scavengers took a small step forward. Like a chain reaction, a wave of movement spread through the ranks of the silent shadows, bringing them to life. All of them shifted, their gazes focusing on Mordred. Members of the Carapace Legion, dwellers of the Crimson Labyrinth, horrors of the Dark City, inhabitants of the Chained Isles. There were monsters of all shapes and sizes, each more terrifying than the other. A horde of creatures that Sonny had slain. There was an abominable spire messenger, a nest of slithering vines, a tall knight in a heavy suit of intricate armor, a strange creature with a chest in place of a head, and many, many more. For the first time, confidence drained from Mordred's face, and he paled. Taking an involuntary step back, the Prince of Nothing hesitated, then said evenly, "Sunless, my dear friend, tell me, why is there an army of dead nightmare creatures hidden in your soul?" Sonny finally managed to grab the midnight shard and slowly rose to his feet, using the takai as support. His teeth flashed in a dark smile. "Oh, I have human souls here too. So don't you worry, Mordred, when I kill you, you'll have good company at least." The mirror fiend chuckled nervously, then slowly brandished the reflection of the cruel sight. In the next moment, the horde of shadows surged forward, descending upon him like an avalanche of darkness. And Mordred suddenly vanished without a trace, as if he had never existed. Sonny opened his eyes, disoriented. The orange glow of the fire and the dancing shadows on the shattered walls, the smell of blood, the tearing pain in his chest. He had escaped the soul sea and returned to the scorched heart of the Night Temple. He had prevailed, but what was going on? It felt as if he was falling. Why was he falling? Sonny crashed onto the cracked stone plates of the floor and heard Welth's body falling somewhere nearby. A tortured groan escaped from his lips, and then a stifled curse. What the hell? Although his battle with Mordred had lasted for a while, it seemed that just a single moment passed in the real world. That time had not even been enough for Sonny to properly fall down. The quiet dancer was still in the same position, and Cassie was still rushing over, dagger in hand. I survived. However, why did it feel like he was forgetting something? Sonny strained his wounded body, trying to sit up. He felt exhausted and weak, both from his physical injuries and the damage his soul had sustained in the harrowing battle against Prince of Nothing. What was it? Cassie was already by his side, reaching out to help him sit. Her rapier hovered in the air, and then turned, the tip of its blade aiming at Welth's unmoving form. Oh, right, where did Mordred disappear to? Suddenly, his eyes widened. Sonny raised his head, pointing at Welth. "Kay, kill her." The quiet dancer was already flashing through the air, reacting faster than its master. Cassie frowned. "What, isn't he?" But it was too late. Welth suddenly moved, her hand shooting forward to catch the flying rapier by the blade. The sharp point stopped just a few centimeters away from her throat. No, Mordred wasn't dead. He had simply run away, retreating from a fight that he knew he wouldn't be able to win. Back to his previous vessel. Cassie stared at the Prince of Nothing in shock, and then shrieked when thin cracks appeared on the blade of the graceful rapier. She hurriedly dismissed the echo, saving it from the crushing grip, and pulled Sonny to his feet. What do we do now?" Sonny saw the body of the ascended knight stirring, as if slowly coming back to life. Her hollow eyes suddenly glistened, becoming full of dark will and lethal intelligence once again. His heart skipped a beat. Now that Mordred had failed to both enslave and possess Sonny, there was only one use for him left: torture the Weaver's mask out of him, and then dispose of what was left. With that fiend wearing a master's body, what were they supposed to do, indeed? Actually, Sonny had a perfect answer. He glanced at Cassie with a determined expression, and then screamed. "What else? Run!" Mordred wasn't the only one who knew when to remove himself from a hopeless situation. Pushing the blind girl toward the large hole in the wall of the former stronghold of the Valor forces, Sonny turned his back on Welth, who was slowly rising to her feet, and sprinted away as fast as he could. His eyes were tightly shut, so that the bastard couldn't spy on them through the reflections. The Night Temple was a large place. With some luck, they would be able to play cat and mouse, or rather, mice and tiger, with the damned prince for a few days. Hopefully, St. Cormac would arrive soon. As he was diving through the breach in the wall, a mocking voice assaulted him from behind. "What, leaving so soon?" Feeling Mordred taking a step forward, Sonny dismissed the heavenly burden. Pierce's corpse, which was still pressed against the ceiling, suddenly plunged down and crashed right in front of the mirror fiend, forcing him to jump back and slow down a little. Without turning his head, Sonny threw the broken oath behind him, then sent the ordinary rock flying into the depths of a random corridor, and ran in the opposite direction with Cassie. As they rushed away, the rock ricocheted off the walls and screamed loudly in Sonny's voice. "Run, run, run!" Sonny didn't expect his tricks to slow down Mordred for long, but with enough of a head start, they were bound to be able to disappear into the confusing labyrinth of the great cathedral. They just had to get out of the inner sanctum in time. Once outside, catching them would be much harder. He might not have been a match for the Prince of Nothing in direct combat, for now, but when it came to stealth and traversal, Sonny had a decisive advantage. Not only could he use Shadow Step to jump across large distances, but he could also use his shadows and senses to scout, spy on the enemy, and navigate in the darkness. Mordred, meanwhile, was only able to see through reflections, which were few and far between in the Night Temple. Hiding from him was not an impossible task, especially with the help of Cassie and her uncanny intuition. The blind girl was going to slow Sonny down somewhat, but at the same time, having her with him was a boon. Just as he thought that, Cassie suddenly pulled him into a barely visible mouth of a narrow corridor, which then led them to a small staircase. They ascended it and ran through a circular hall, sliding down the domed floor and then climbing back up. As they did, an echo of a deafening crash reached their ears, announcing that the Prince of Nothing was not too far behind. What was the bastard doing, breaking through stone walls instead of searching for a path? The interior of the citadel was bizarre and confusing, so Sonny quickly lost his sense of direction. All he knew was that they weren't moving toward the familiar exit out of the inner sanctum, nor were they approaching the central bell tower. His doubts were dispelled, however, when Cassie opened a narrow wooden door and cold wind hit him in the face. Somehow they had reached the grand hall of the cathedral, where the broken gateway stood in the center of the vast basin of the craterous dome. Instead of entering it through the tall gates of the inner sanctum, Sonny and Cassie appeared on a hidden gallery circling the hall's perimeter high above. Almost at the same time, a familiar figure emerged from the gates far below. Mordred was right below them, walking out into the great hall of the somber cathedral at a relaxed pace. Above his shoulders, a dozen blinding orbs of light hovered in the air, throwing white reflections of the dark stones. Sonny silently stepped back, pulling Cassie with him. Pressed against the back wall of the gallery and safely hidden in the deep shadows, they slowly moved away. Below, the spheres of light suddenly shot in different directions, illuminating a large portion of the dark nave. Luckily, their radiance did not reach the hidden gallery, be it just barely. What it did reach, though, were the hundreds of mirror shards scattered around the vast expanse of the inverse hall. Each of them shone, reflecting the white light. It was as though countless stars suddenly ignited in the darkness. Sonny silently cursed, knowing that those shards served Mordred as eyes, who knew how many more were hidden throughout the cathedral. Without slowing down, he dismissed the memories he had left behind and continued moving toward the distant end of the vast circular chamber. The Prince of Nothing, meanwhile, tilted his head a little. Where are they hiding, I wonder? Suddenly, he was surrounded by a whirlwind of white sparks. Sonny did not linger to see what memories Mordred was summoning, and instead concentrated on reaching another door. Before the sparks of light coalesced into tangible shapes, Cassie and he had already left the gallery, finding themselves in another corridor. They had successfully left the sanctum behind and were now in the main structure of the citadel. It was a large and convoluted space, so finding them here was not going to be easy. From where they stood now, just outside the nave, they could go anywhere in the temple proper, exit into the outward ring, or descend into any of the 6 belfries. They could even circle back and try to hide in the 7th, the main bell tower, hoping that the mirror fiend would not expect them to return. However, somehow, Sonny doubted that escaping Mordred would be that easy. The morbid remains of his butchered victims were all around them after all. None of these people had escaped. He hesitated for a moment, then pulled Cassie in the direction of the outward ring. That was the part of the citadel they both knew the best, which was an important advantage. Of course, the banished prince understood that too, which meant that he would most likely be moving there too. This was a risk Sonny had to take. At the end of the day, their goal was to escape, and they could only do that by reaching the sealed gates of the Night Temple. A few hours passed, suffused with fear and tension. Sonny and Cassie had moved through the main structure of the cathedral, getting closer and closer to the outward ring. On the way, they took a short break, partially to eat and replenish their strength, but mostly because he simply couldn't walk anymore. The exhaustion and pain were taking their toll on Sonny. Finding a safe spot, he fell to the floor and remained motionless for a while, breathing hoarsely. Then he dismissed the breastplate of the undying chain, pulled the shirt hiding beneath up, and tentatively explored the dire wound dealt to him by Mordred. The result was not too good. Sonny wasn't going to die anytime soon, but neither was he going to heal quickly. For the time being, he was as good as crippled. Curses! At least he had not bled to death. That was something, at least. He summoned the breastplate back, then opened the covetous coffer and took out a couple of tubes of synth paste. The 2 of them hurriedly consumed the nutritious sludge, and then it was time to get back up again. Before that, however, Cassie handed him something. Here, you hold on to this. Sonny took the item and raised his eyebrows, recognizing the shape. It was a small piece of cold steel, shaped into a semblance of an anvil. His fingers, though, could feel that the thing was not at all simple. In fact, it seemed like one of the most potent artifacts he had ever held. "Welth's amulet, when did you grab it?" The blind girl sighed. "After you opened your eyes. I should have tried to reach his body in time instead. If only I had more essence I could have seen, could have done something differently." Sonny hesitated for a moment, then threw the amulet into the maw of the covetous coffer. "Why are you so down? Yeah, we might have failed to get rid of that bastard, but then again, we've done better than 100 lost and 2 knights of valor did. That's not too bad of an achievement, isn't it? Plus, Mordred's plans are also ruined. He might seem in control, but trust me, that guy is in as much trouble as we are. Things didn't exactly go his way, either." The blind girl remained silent for a few moments, then nodded and helped him stand up. Somewhat rested, but not at all free of exhaustion, they continued moving forward, soon crossing into the outward ring. When they did, however, Cassie suddenly froze, then trembled. Sonny tensed. "What?" Then he heard it too, the insidious sound of approaching footsteps, and a second later, Welth's familiar voice. "There you are." Gritting his teeth, Sonny grabbed Cassie's hand and ran in the opposite direction. "Damn it, damn it, damn it." His chest was burning, pulsating with excruciating pain. They moved with all the speed they could muster, but what was the point? A master was so much faster than an awakened. Even though Mordred didn't seem to be in a hurry, the sound of his footsteps was growing closer and closer. Before he could reach them, however, the whole night temple suddenly shook, throwing Sonny to the floor. An explosion of pain radiated through his body. And a moment later, his shadow sense was not constrained by the outer walls of the citadel anymore. It pierced the black stone and easily reached into the vast emptiness beyond. Sonny clenched his fists. The seal, it's lifted. The saint had arrived. At that point, Sonny and Cassie weren't too far away from the gate chamber, where they had made a morbid discovery soon after escaping from the cage. Back then, the heavy gates had been closed and sealed. Now, however, it seemed that they were finally opened. Saint Cormac had returned from his expedition to the Hollow Mountains, a few days sooner than expected. For a moment, Sonny was overcome by fierce joy. Then, however, the cold and rational part of his mind took over. Yes, the arrival of the saint created a path of escape, and was bound to solve their Mordred problem, most likely. But who was to say that the transcendent warrior would not turn out to be an even deadlier threat? The first thing Saint Cormac was going to see after entering the citadel was a pile of mutilated corpses. After that, he would most likely kill anyone who appeared in his way. After all, any survivor would either be a potential vessel of the banished prince or a witness. Sonny gritted his teeth, then rose to his feet and pulled Cassie into a side corridor. There, they hid in the shadows, wrapped her cloak around themselves, and waited. He didn't dare to extend his shadow sense toward the gates or send his shadows forward to scout, fearful to draw the saint's attention, so neither of them knew what was going on. A few seconds passed in terrifying silence, and then Sonny heard something rustle through the corridor they had just left. A gust of wind blew past them, as if left behind by something moving at incredible speed. A moment later, they heard a distant impact, and the night temple trembled once again. It seemed that Saint Cormac had already found Mordred. Sonny pushed Cassie to her feet and hissed, "Hurry to the gate." They ran toward the exit. Soon, the familiar chamber came into view, fresh air mixing with the terrible smell of the rotting corpses. The gates of the night temple stood wide open, the impenetrable darkness of the sky below stretching into eternity beyond them. The tall doorway seemed like a portal into the endless night. Not slowing down even for a moment, Sonny and Cassie dashed toward freedom, passed through the gates, and finally escaped the cursed cathedral. After a month of suffering, bloodshed, and harrowing dread they had experienced in this ghastly stone trap, the air of the lightless abyss seemed sweet like nectar. Just as they left, the night temple shuddered once again, dust falling from its ancient walls. Far below, the bells rang somberly, their usually melodious song sounding strangely staggered and frantic. The saint was battling the Prince of Nothing, the whole citadel suffering the burden of their furious clash. "Hurry, it's not over yet." The two of them dashed across the rickety bridge that swayed above the chasm of the sky below on rusty chains, and soon reached the treacherous stairs that skirted the slope of the northern island. Running up the narrow steps, both of them knew that one wrong step could potentially cost them their lives. But Sunny was unwilling to slow down. They had to reach the surface, cross the island, traverse the heavenly chain, all before St. Cormac was done dealing with the escaped prisoner. "Too long, this is taking too long." Sunny hesitated for a moment, then summoned the heavenly burden. "Climb onto my back." Cassie lingered, then did as she was told. He drove the black needle between the plates of the undying chain, cursed, and then threw his hand forward, the triangular blade of the prowling thorn shooting into the overhanging stone slope. With the blind girl's weight added to his own, the speed of their ascent wasn't too fast. However, with the help of the kunai and its invisible string, Sunny was able to increase it somewhat. It was an arduous and nerve-wracking journey. The two of them were like a spider scaling a mountain with the help of a single thread of silk. The difference was that the mountain was steeper than vertical, and there were furious winds threatening to either crush them against the stones or throw them away into the darkness of the sky below. However, after a dozen torturous minutes, or maybe an eternity, they still managed to reach the surface of the island alive. Sunny dismissed the needle and fell onto the soft ground, gripping his chest. There were disturbing, wheezing sounds coming out of his lungs with each breath. He lay motionless for a few moments, then allowed Cassie to pull him to his feet. I know, we need to move. It's not time to rest yet." They ran across the field of flowers, the hollow mountains towering behind them. White mist was flowing down their slopes, and there was something white dancing in the air in front of them, too. Sunny felt a pleasant cold spreading across his burning face. His heart contracted painfully. Snow, it's snowing. Was it December already, or did the first snowfall arrive ahead of time as well? There was no escaping fate. The northern island trembled beneath them. And just a few moments later, a dark figure appeared in their way. Sunny had never met St. Cormac, but he recognized him almost instantly. Only a transcended could have such a deep, unfathomable shadow, and a presence that seemed to affect the very world around him. The saint looked to be in his 30s, with a cold face and dark, ruthless eyes. His black armor was battered and worn, barely holding together after a month of exploring the death zone. Surprisingly, it wasn't too impressive as far as armor-type memories went. Neither was he wielding a terrifying weapon. His fingers, however, were covered with fresh blood, crimson drops falling down and painting the delicate violet flowers red. It seemed that Mordred had failed to gain freedom in the end. His last vessel was destroyed. St. Cormac frowned, looking at the two of them, then took a step forward. The snow swirled, surrounding him like a cold mantle. Sunny was suddenly overwhelmed by a feeling of suffocating killing intent. He shifted slightly, pushing Cassie behind him. His eyes darted around, hopping to find something, anything, that would save their lives. Then suddenly the world darkened, as though a transient shadow covered the sun. A second later, the shadow was gone in a rustle of wings, and a tall, slender woman was standing between them and the approaching saint, her posture straight like an arrow. Sky Tide shielded Sunny and Cassie with her body, and glanced at the other transcended warrior, her beautiful face as cold and stark as always, her vertical pupils full of calm, grim resolve. "That is enough, Cormac. Turn back." Sonny staggered back, stunned by the sudden appearance of St. Tyrus. A tense, dangerous silence settled over the island after she spoke, with only the wailing of the wind breaking it. Snow danced in the air, slowly settling onto the cold ground. His heart was beating like a caged animal. Where did she come from? What is going on, damn it? Cormac scowled and looked at the slender woman with a dark expression on his stern, weathered face. The saint did not seem amused by the sudden appearance of the leader of the White Feather clan. "Sky Tide, stay out of this." St. Tyrus didn't move, still shielding Sonny and Cassie with her slender body. The wind picked up, and the clouds seemed to become heavier, as if expressing her suppressed emotions. Only, as Sonny realized, they weren't suppressed at all. Sky Tide just didn't show them on her face. Instead, the world itself did it for her. "I think not." Cormac winced, resentful sparks appearing in his eyes. "You don't know what you are interfering with, Tyrus. Get out of my way. This is not your business." She shifted slightly, the howling of wind growing louder. The violet flowers bent, pressed down to the ground. "This is my land. These awakened are of my citadel. Anything that happens here and to them is my business." The other saint sighed, then took a step forward. "The entire garrison of the Night Temple was wiped out. These two are the only witnesses. Are you sure that you want to make their fate your burden?" Sky Tide frowned, then spoke, her voice even. "If that is true, we can question them together, back in the sanctuary." Cormac smiled darkly, then shook his head. "I'm afraid that won't be convenient. You might not know my task here, Tyrus, but you know who gave it to me. Obstructing me in this matter is the same as obstructing the will of valor. You wouldn't want to do that, would you?" A corner of Sky Tide's mouth suddenly twisted upward. She stared at the fearsome saint and said, a hint of mocking in her voice, "What is he going to do? How is he going to punish me? Exile my clan to a remote frontier region, maybe? Oh, wait." She took a step forward as well, her tone changing, becoming darker and heavier. The clouds swallowed the sun, submerging the world into shadows. "You have forgotten, Cormac. I am Sky Tide of the White Feather clan, not Valor. I am a vassal of the king, not his servant. 6 years ago, I looked the other way and allowed your odious scheme to happen. I have regretted it ever since. This is my land, my isles. You are only a guest here. I warn you, do not test the limits of my hospitality." As she spoke the last words, a deafening thunderclap resounded, rolling across the chained aisles like a herald of heavenly wrath. Cormac stared at her, unimpressed. An expression of contempt appeared in the depths of his cold, dangerous eyes. The saint moved his shoulders as if stretching his muscles, and then said darkly, "Your arrogance is so tiresome, Tyrus. Warn me. What gives you the courage to warn me? You say that I have forgotten, but it is you who doesn't seem to remember who I am, and what I am capable of." He stepped forward, his killing intent growing thicker and more suffocating, almost palpable. "What gave you the idea that this is a negotiation? You will stand down or I will put you down. Either way, the result will be the same." St. Tyrus lingered for a moment, then looked over her shoulder at Sonny and Cassie. Her gaze was calm and somber. "It's time for the two of you to go." Sonny took a step back, his mouth suddenly dry. He opened it, trying to force out a question. But what about?" Sky Tide was already looking at Cormac, who was approaching with steady steps. Her hair danced in the wind like a stream of pale gold. "Run, you won't survive the fury of this battle." Sonny hesitated for a split second, then grabbed Cassie and ran. They dashed away from the two saints, heading for the distant edge of the island. He didn't know what a fight between transcendents would look like, but had no doubt that mere mortals like the two of them had no place in the middle of it. Crazy. The world has gone completely crazy. A moment later, something collided with a thunderous roar behind them, and Sunny was thrown into the air. A violent shockwave passed through his body, causing a short scream to escape from his mouth. He hit the ground and felt it shifting, as if a powerful earthquake was happening mere meters away. Sunny struggled to rise back to his feet, then helped Cassie do the same and continued to run. Shards of stone flew past them like bullets, and the snowfall was already turning into a furious blizzard. Behind them, two vast shadows rose into the sky. One was a giant bird of prey, her feathers white, her sharp beak and devastating talons forged out of lustrous, polished steel. Her enormous wings were wreathed in thunderclouds, and bolts of lightning danced around her body like a radiant mantle. The other was a ferocious wyvern, his black scales as dark as the abyss, with mighty muscles rolling under them like iron chains. The head of the creature was crowned with twisting horns, and in his maw, countless sharp fangs glowed darkly, illuminated by immolating red flame burning in the depths of the beast's adamantine body. Tyrus and Cormac flew into the skies, soon disappearing in the veil of storm clouds. A terrifying roar rolled across the island, and then another shockwave hit, tearing a hole in the blizzard. Boiling blood suddenly streamed from above, falling on the snow like vermilion rain. Gods, oh gods! Sunny and Cassie could only run. From time to time, a violent tremor threw them to the ground. The hurricane wind threw snow and sharp bits of ice into their faces, and their ears were ringing from the thunderous cacophony of the titanic battle happening somewhere above them. They were almost to the edge of the island, ready to jump onto the chain, when there was a sudden lull in the terrifying havoc. And then two shadows fell down from the skis, so fast that Sunny couldn't even tell who was who. The saints collided against the center of the island with such force that its surface swayed like water. The shockwave of the impact was so fierce that it instantly obliterated the field of flowers, blew away the top layers of the soil, and made the stronghold on the northern edge crumble into dust. The ground itself split open, a wide crack spreading to both ends of the isle, cutting it in two. The northern island shuddered, and then crumbled, large pieces of stone breaking off and flying into the darkness as more and more cracks appeared, and the tension of the heavenly chains tore the island apart. Sunny, of course, could not appreciate the full scope of the disaster. All he could sense was that they were sent rolling down once again, this time even more violently than before. Only this time, instead of soil or stone, what they found beneath them was nothing. The ground disappeared, and Sunny found himself falling down, 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 down into the endless darkness of the sky below. All he could do was grab Cassie and hold her close, making sure that they weren't separated. Bloodied, mangled, and weak, they plummeted into the abyss as all around them, devastation reigned. The night temple cracked, then disintegrated into a rain of black stones. The 7 bells rang mournfully as they disappeared into the void. The colossal chain that served as one of the anchors of the chained isles shot toward the hollow mountains, colliding with their slopes with enough force to make the ancient slope shatter and create a momentary hole in the veil of flowing mist. Luckily for Sunny, his eyes were still closed, so he didn't see what hid beneath. And somewhere in all this chaos, the two saints continued their harrowing battle. Sunny held Cassie tightly and fell, happy to be getting further and further away from that clash with each second. After a while, the sounds of the fighting disappeared far above. The signs of destruction disappeared, too, as well as the last remnants of the light. Now they were falling through absolute darkness in complete silence and solitude, with nothing threatening their lives. It was sort of peaceful. Sunny sighed, finally allowed himself to open his eyes, then glanced at Cassie and forced out a weak smile. "See, we're not dead. Your vision was a bust again." She trembled. How are you so calm? We are falling into the sky below, not dead, yet." He tried to laugh, then winced and decided against it. "This place is actually not so bad. Just wait for a little, we'll fall for a bit more, and then I'll summon memories to either guide us back up or push us toward the rift. We have food and water at least. You won't believe what I had to eat the last time." Remembering the dead mimic, Sunny shivered. "Yeah, this is definitely not bad. Believe me, it could have been so much worse." However, as soon as Sunny said that, something changed in the lightless void. A swift shadow shot toward them, surrounded by a circle of furious light. "What?" Before Sunny could even react, two hands extended toward them, one grabbing him, the other closing around the nape of Cassie's cloak. With nothing to stand on, they were as defenseless as Pierce had been moments before Sunny killed him. "Damna! Oh, thank gods I found you." He blinked. That voice, why did it sound familiar? Sunny stared into the light, his eyes slowly adjusting to it. Soon, he was able to see the shape of a paper lantern that floated in the air, just above the shoulder of a tall, infuriatingly handsome young man in a needlessly fashionable armor. Sunny opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. "Hi, what the hell are you doing here?" The charming archer smiled, an expression of joy and profound relief appearing on his face. "What else? Rescuing you, of course. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.